Hello, fellow music lovers. Thank you so much for dropping by this channel. And I wanted to talk about Huey Lewis and the bad news he got recently about his hearing. He's got this thing called Menieres Disease, and it affects his ability to hear properly. As a result, he can't find his pitch, and it's really not good. Doctors told him he cannot sing, he cannot go out there until things get better, if they get better. You know, this has pretty much devastated Huey Lewis because this is what he loves doing. He's had to pull all the concert dates for the rest of the year. This is what he loves doing. So I really hope that he gets better and he's able to get back out there. I'm really glad I got a chance to see him a few years back in Nashville. He did the whole sports album front to back. That was a real treat. I really enjoyed that show. And kind of got me thinking about my top 5 favorite Huey Lewis moments. I mean, I grew up with the guy. You know, he was on the radio, he was on the television, and I'd have to say number 1 on my list is going to be the sports album. I mean, that album was his biggest album. It was kind of like a thriller in that practically every song was a hit or on the radio. Lots of good stuff on there. You had like Heart of Rock and Roll, Heart and Soul, I Want a New Drug. Bad is a cool song. Walking on a Thin Line is another good song. You know, everybody had this album. I mean, it was such a hit. So that's got to be number 1. Number 2 is going to be MTV. MTV and Huey Lewis came out around the same time, and it was like the perfect storm. MTV was getting into more and more households. Huey Lewis was getting more and more popular. He was able to use that format in such a way that he was able to relate to the average guy, because he kind of came off as the average guy. His videos were kind of funny, cheesy. He was always going after the chicks, and the chicks were always really, really cute. And he was able to use that format of video to his advantage to sell a lot more albums. So I got to give him that. Number 3, Ghostbusters. Remember that? He was asked to do the theme song to Ghostbusters, but he turned it down because he was doing some other things. And Ray Parker Jr. wound up getting it. And he came up with a song that sounded just like I Want a New Drug. So much so that Huey Lewis sued him, and he actually won. And then Huey Lewis, like a number of years later, they did a Behind the Music with him, and he started talking about the whole Ghostbusters thing. Ray Parker Jr. sued him because he said that he was in breach of some kind of a confidentiality agreement. So what a mess that whole thing was. Number 4 is going to be American Psycho. Remember that movie? Featured Christian Bale, I believe, as the psychopath. And there was a scene in there where he was getting ready to take this guy out. And before he did, though, he had this big speech about the sports album and Huey Lewis and his follow-up album, 4. And it was kind of a weird moment in that film. It kind of like reminded me of what Quentin Tarantino would probably pull, you know, and something like what he did in the Reservoir Dogs with Stuck in the Middle with You. You can remember that. It's not quite as bad as that, but Huey Lewis didn't really care for that a whole lot, and so he didn't want his song Hip to Be Square on the soundtrack. But oops, the soundtrack had already been printed. The first many thousand copies were already out there, and the second pressing did not feature that song. So if you've got a copy of that soundtrack with Hip to Be Square, you've got yourself a rare item there. So number 5 on my list of the most memorable Huey Lewis moments would have to be Back to the Future, another film. You would think that Huey, after this point, would be like, look, I want nothing to do with film. And actually, he did try to turn this down, but they were like, look, just send us whatever you got. And he sent them Power of Love. The song happened to fit into the storyline with Michael J. Fox and his girlfriend, and everything worked out great. And they asked him for a second song. He gave them Back in Time, which is a fun song. And the rest is history. I mean, everything worked out perfectly, and Huey finally had himself a movie and a soundtrack that he could live with. And so those are my top 5 Huey Lewis moments. Sports, MTV, Ghostbusters, American Psycho, and Back to the Future. And if you can think of anything else, let me know. Huey Lewis is a rarity now. He's a rock and roll band. There aren't too many rock and roll bands out there. There's rock bands, plenty of those, if you can find them, but they're out there. But rock and roll, you know, he had the horns and the soul, and it's becoming a lost art. You don't really see that. So, you know, I really do hope that Huey can get back out and do what he loves. And, you know, put your comments below. Let me know what you think about this. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you later.